Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. This morning, I wanted to talk about something that I am not only continuing to heal with in my life today, but something that I have also came a long way into, and that is this idea of perfection. And yeah, it's been a struggle at times. This idea that I had built up in my head about being perfect and perfection and what I wanted my life to look like and how I wanted to be perceived by the world. And I always wanted to have like this picture perfect life, and kind of like living in like this fairy tale or something. And I thought that's what life was supposed to look like, and it was supposed to be perfect. And once I got to a certain point, things were not supposed to be hard. And everything was supposed to be smooth all the time. And if it wasn't smooth, I had to be doing something wrong, because I had this idea of perfection in my head. And so it created a lot of suffering in my life. This idea that I had, these ideas that I had, it created a whole lot of suffering in my life. And probably the most recent example that was like very, very difficult for me was when I was in school. And I was so hard on myself. Like, I had to be the perfect student. Like, I had to like get all the good grades, and I had to like go above and beyond and do everything that I possibly could to be the perfect student. And it created a lot of suffering in my life. And I was so hard on myself. I had no grace for myself whatsoever. It was like I was like this militant disciplinary when it came to me. Like, I had to be so disciplined that I wouldn't even give myself a break. And then when I did take a break, I like felt guilty about it. And I would be thinking about like, no, I need to get back to studying, or I need to like do this, or I need to do that. Like, it was just this constant nagging in my head that it wasn't good enough. I needed to be better. It needed to be better. And it created so much suffering in my life. And even to the point where it would like paralyze me at times. I would like be trying to write a paper, and it wasn't good enough, and it wasn't perfect, and it was just a rough draft. And but it had to be perfect. And and there's no such thing as perfect. So I was trying to write this impossible paper, and I couldn't like even get the words on the page, because the idea that I had of perfection, it didn't even exist. And so it would paralyze me to the point where like I couldn't even get started on this paper. And I would like say like, I'm gonna come up with something that's gonna be perfect, and it would be like last minute, and I would be like, okay, like I gotta get going, like maybe it's not gonna be perfect. And finally at the last minute, I could like write this paper, because I knew by that point, like, I'm not striving for perfection, I just need to get it done. And so it would like paralyze me to the point where I couldn't even like get started. So it created a lot of suffering in my life. And I could like go down the list of like all the things in my life that I wanted to be perfect, that I needed to be perfect, like my relationships with friends, families, or partners, and you know my social life, or just like all the aspects of my life. I had this idea that they had to be perfect. My relationship had to be perfect, my life had to be perfect, like, my house had to be perfect, my car had to be perfect, all these things that I thought mattered. And and this idea of perfection that I wanted, that never even existed in the first place, like that is like what I was living by. Was like was like this cycle, this vicious cycle that I was living in, of like perfection. And eventually, when my life was a mess, or things were not going the way that I wanted them to go, or things did not look according to my idea of perfection, I pushed everybody away, because I didn't want anybody to see the imperfect side of me, or I didn't want anybody to see anything less than perfect for me. So I would push people out of my life, and I would isolate myself, and I wouldn't talk to friends and family. And I was so miserable, because I had this idea of what I thought I wanted, or what I thought I could obtain, in my life, and this idea of perfection. And my goodness, it was a hard lesson to learn. And still to this day, it's something that I have to be very aware of and stay very aware of. And it creeps up in these really interesting ways that like almost like sneak past me if I'm not like paying attention. And sometimes I'm like going about my life, and I'm doing things, and then I realize like, oh wow, like okay, like I'm still living in this idea of like perfection. And because it's been programmed in me since I was a kid. And and I'm like been going through this deprogramming. And a big thing is like loving myself, and finding a way to finally love myself, and letting go of these ideas of like perfection, and detaching from the things that I thought made me, like I was talking about in my last video, about like these ideas of like who I am, and as attached to like money and cars and houses, like detaching from those things, like and becoming aware like this is creating suffering in my life, and how am I going to combat that suffering, and what am I going to do to like detach from these ideas of like perfection that I have been programmed to have. And it hasn't been easy, and it's actually it's still definitely a work in progress for me. But like I said, sometimes it just creeps up, and I don't even know it until I like sit and take a moment and try to figure out what is going on inside me or with me. And I realize like, oh okay, like I'm still striving for like this perfection in an aspect or area of my life. And and then I realize like, okay, like I have more work to do. And but I can give myself the grace today, and I know that I don't have to be perfect. And I know there's this idea of perfection doesn't even exist. Nothing is perfect in this life. And sometimes things are difficult, and sometimes things are good, and everything's going great. And then sometimes I realize that I need some extra work in different areas in my life. But today I have the awareness to see that, and I can acknowledge that, and I can give myself the grace, and not beat myself up today. That was a major shift in my mindset, was like not beating myself up when things didn't go according to plan, or things didn't work out the way I wanted them to work out. They worked out exactly how they were supposed to, but maybe it wasn't like how I wanted it or how I pictured it. But I can I don't have to beat myself up about those things today, and I can give myself the grace and love myself more and more each day, and continue to work on this aspect of my life. So it's definitely something that's in progress in my life, in this healing shift in my life. And I will continue to work at it. And it's a work in progress, and I've come a long way, but I know there's still things in my life that I need to do to heal even more. So if you're on this healing journey, just know that you're not alone. I love you.